Okay.
Fair warning.
This conference will now be recorded.
Steve, how are you? Good.
Do you know if Roger's coming?
Have we heard?
I talked to Roger this afternoon, he said he would be here.
There he is.
Howdy.
How are you?
Just in time for the party.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 28th Planning and Zoning meeting. Roll call.
Manson,
Present.
Garrett,
Present.
Templin,
Here.
Lane,
Here.
Milborn,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
Huggins. It appears Commissioner Huggins is absent.
Okay, item 3, general business. Approve the planning commission agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the planning commission agenda.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Item passes. Approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on January 24th, 2023.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I've got one suggested change. The top of the meeting minutes show the meeting starting at 7:00 PM. I think it was actually,
Oh, yes, okay, sorry about that, excuse me.
You didn't see that. Okay, approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on January 24th, 2023.
Make a motion, we approve them.
We have a motion.
Second.
Have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Disclosure of conflicts of interest, do we have any?
Yes, I need to recuse myself from 5B and 7B.
5D and,
5B
okay,
and 7B.
Chairman Garrett, I have to excuse myself from 5B, 7B, and 7C.
okay. Disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business.
No.
Okay. Item E, election of officers, and what we're going to do about that tonight is, I'll open the meeting for the election of officers, and we'll elect the chair first, and then we'll elect the vice chair, and then when that's over with, Roger or anybody or Linda or, we'll just switch places what we're gonna do. Because we're a little lax on this, we haven't done it in about 3 years so. We should do it about what, every 2 years?
Every year.
Every year? Okay. So at this time, I'd like to open up the elections. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I would nominate Roger Timplin.
Roger Tiplin, anybody else? Okay, we'll close that. All in favor of Roger Tiplin, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Roger will be the new chairperson.
Lucky you.
Okay, vice chair. Nominations for vice chair. I would nominate Linda Lane.
Second.
Okay. No other nominations? Then Linda will be our new vice chair. At this time, I'd like to turn the gavel over to Roger, and he will conduct the rest of the meeting.
Okay.
Grab your name tag if you would.
So you don't forget who you are. You learn again.
Okay, well, thank you or curse you, I'm not sure which, but one or the other. At this time, I would ask for members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda to speak at this time. This is a call to public. Any presentations for informational purposes only. No action will be taken today, and there's a 4-minute time limit. Does anyone wish to address the planning commission of matters that aren't on the agenda today? Seeing none, I'll close the call to the public and turning then to item 5A. Consider utility scale solar ordinance. I assume Brad is the right guy to call upon for this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Roger. I guess since we are having a public hearing, we ought to open that and begin the staff report.
My preference would be to do the staff report and then open the public hearing.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the past 8 months, city staff, planning commission have been looking at utility scale solar facilities, as it's a fairly significant proposal that could take place at the former Sunflower Ammunition Plant. We also have representatives from Savion here tonight. They are solar developers that are interested in the area. And as over the past months, we've had several meetings with Planning Commission. City staff has met with Johnson County staff. And also, as an overview, our ordinance is based upon Johnson County staff. And so we met with them several times, and then we've tailored their information to what would work and fit well within DeSoto city limits. So while Johnson County had a lot of influence, and it is our ordinance and it is our governance, so this is something that we will be doing and administering within city of DeSoto. I have included the ordinance as we've revised it over the past 8 months, and some of the key items that are highlighted in red are the items that the planning commission really kind of zeroed in on that we felt were pretty important to look at. And so that language has been modified and changed to meet your needs. Some of the following points I think that are most important and things that we need to talk about tonight is the boundaries of the item. At first, we just had a size limitation. We certainly knew that we wanted to have this type of facility out at the former Army ammunition plant, but we were looking at the size as sort of the regulatory where it could only fit at that location. As we had those discussions, we decided to go ahead and establish boundaries. And 143rd Street is the southern boundary, and then the eastern boundary is Springtown Road, and the western boundary is Evening Star. Now that was pretty easy to get the east, west, and the southern boundary. The northern boundary was a little bit, and is a little bit, something that we'll need ultimately the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on. Staff is recommending 2,500 acres for the size. I know we initially started at 3,000, talked about 2,500, and the Planning Commission was talking about 2,000 acres. And so what I did was put together a fairly crude map, but I did go to Johnson County Ames and try to determine how many acreages would be based on our typical streets. And Mike, if you could scroll to the end of the staff report to Exhibit B, and I can kind of explain this a little bit. The 2,000 acre mark would be at 127th Street, and those are the street numbers. That's 127th right there. And then that 260 acres plot is something that'd be consistent throughout all of the items. So if you go to that 127th line and add the 260, you get about 2,000 acres. And so that's where you would end up with sort of the Planning Commission's initial or most recent recommendation to city staff. If you moved it up to 123rd Street, you'd get to about 2,450 acres, around 2,500 at 123rd Street line. And then if you moved it to 121st Street, it'd be at 2,800 acres, and then at 119th is about 119th is about 3,100 acres of available property for solar, for utility scale solar. Our recommendation was to split that difference and make that recommendation at 123rd Street to the Planning Commission. Of course, it is ultimately your decision to what you want to recommend to the City Council for ultimate adoption, but I wanted to make that clear where these lines are and what kind of space we're talking about, and how much of the whole entire or the portion of the Sunflower ammunition tract could be utilized for utility scale solar. A couple other items that are in the staff report is I changed the project boundary definition to project extent, which means the extent includes everything, the size of the project, the area where the solar panels are, battery facilities, substations, wildlife corridors, road corridors, all the things that might be running through the solar facility. It is the entire boundary of the whole project. And so that's what we're talking about when we're defining the size of the project, whether it's 2,500 or 2,000 or more. We did talk about a formal development agreement with that term in the ordinance, and also a payment in lieu of franchise fees in case a back of the meter agreement was worked out with the solar developer and a potential property energy purchaser. We've also added language to repair public roads during construction and the decommissioning process. We've also added a provision for proof of coordination with the Northwest Consolidated Fire District and a hazardous materials response plan. And also they must be in compliance with all fire and building codes. We've also indicated a length of term capped at 30 years. And as I had mentioned before, we've suggested maximum size of 2,500 acres for the project. I did change the minimum setback, reduced it from 150 feet to 100, and this is because of the area for the solar facility is surrounded by Johnson County Parkland. That process of dedicating that land to Johnson County Parks is underway, so it didn't feel like it was as necessary to have as great a buffer, since the parks will be buffered, is part of the buffer from any kind of development that, or people's residences outside the solar area and also outside the Sunflower ammunition plant, former ammunition plant. Also have a provision for utility, wildlife, and road corridors that we talked about has been added. We also mentioned the surety for decommissioning in 30 years if that actually goes through, or if a new special use permit is not granted and the solar facility needs to be taken out of service. City, there are different types of surety, and we just want to make sure this is one that is stable and will be around in 30 years from the date that the potential special use permit is adopted by the Planning Commission or the City Council. Then also there is a waiver that actually has been in this the whole time, but I wanted you to be aware of it. There is a waiver, opportunity for a waiver that can be granted by the City Council after submitting in writing to the planning director, and that could be the city administrator, city engineer. That's just the term that the county used, so I just adopted that. And this only applies to the size of the facility and its term. So all the other things that we have, wildlife corridors, arterial road corridors, substations, utility corridors, things like that, cannot be waived. Those will be part of the development agreement. It's just the size of the facility itself, and then also the term of the length of term for the solar facility. So with that, I think we've gone through this several times. We've probably had about 4 or 5 meetings on this subject, and I think we're at the point where we're ready to make a recommendation to the City Council. That's why we're having a public hearing tonight. And with that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions for Brad?
Fred, I have a question for you. With all the items that have been spoken for, go in out there, how many acres does that leave left?
Well, it depends on obviously where that northern boundary is established, but I did include on that map, you can see where the Astra development, the final plat phase 1 is, and that's about 1,000 acres.
It's 1,300.
Okay, yeah, it's over 1,300 acres, and then 119th Street is around 3,000, so you take out the 2,000 that the parks have gotten, and you're probably around 3,000 remaining of the entire 9,000 acres that were in the site. So it is a sizable portion of the former ammunition plant that could potentially, this is just an ordinance, so, but certainly there's a lot of property that will be spoken for rather quickly.
And what is their reason for wanting 2,500?
Well, actually, they have a lease with Sunflower for 3,000, so they were preferring 3,000 as far as it's just their economics, and there are representatives from Savion here tonight, but to make the project viable in their mind, they would prefer to have 3,000 acres.
Well, you know, the county had looked at this same thing and they adopted a 2,000 acre standard.
Correct.
Do you think we should go over that?
Well, the county has different challenges as far as they don't have such a big block of property. They're going to have to, if you look at their ordinance, they have little squares, and they might have to leapfrog people that want to have the solar on their property and others that don't. So they capped theirs to try to make it so it wasn't so, obtrusive for surrounding residents, because they have sort of a patchwork quilt of property that they would have to deal with, and we have one property owner and one chunk of land, so it's a little bit easier to have a larger facility. It would all be mostly contiguous, other than that 260 acres in the bottom right corner. So I feel like the 2,500 is certainly feasible.
So if we do the 2,500, they're gonna put solars on the whole 2,500 to start, or are they gonna set some back for later on?
We haven't gotten that far. That's part of the development agreement that would be negotiated between city staff and ultimately approved by city council.
It would be part of a special use permit.
Yeah.
Permit as well that would come here.
Okay,
Specifics like that.
Mm-hmm.
that's all I got.
Brad, can other developments go within that boundary besides solar if they don't use the whole 2,500?
Well, it would probably be under lease at that point, so the answer would be no. It would be all solar, or all the boundary, the extents, including those wildlife corridors, things like that.
Brad, who develops the wildlife corridor? Who, I know that's in here, but who makes that establishment?
Well, that's on the applicant to put those in the development plan, so that's part of what they would present to us. And we would have to fact check it, do all the things that we have to do to make sure that it's appropriate. I would imagine that they would hire a consultant to do something like that. They're in a solar energy company. They don't do wildlife studies.
That's why I wondered who was gonna do it.
Yeah, it won't be city staff, I can tell you that.
And who does the fencing and making sure that there's adequate spaces for them to get out once they're in there?
As far as the potential wildlife, I mean, that would be all part of the study itself, saying how wide the corridor needs to be, what areas need to be fenced, things like that.
And then our codes would make sure that that's in place.
Yeah, it would be part of our inspection process as it goes in, and we might need to hire a specialty inspector to help with something like this as well. Kind of like what we're doing out of Panasonic right now.
I guess I'm a little surprised that they're not going to put in all the solar panels at once, but they're getting access to all that property.
Well, they might put them all in, and like I said, there's representatives from Savion here tonight, so their business plan would be, certainly they want to generate as much power as possible, as soon as possible, but I don't know if it'd be part of the development plan that they present a special use permit to, whether they're going to do 1,000 acres at a time and move forward from that regard. So we're just saying this is the maximum size, and how they want to phase it within their potential development would be part of the special use permit.
Brad, I'm curious as to the language that was added to the project extent provision on page 1.
Yeah, the reason that,
Understand that language.
yeah, I had that originally as project boundary, and I think that was something that was suggested by county staff, was
Well,
the
last-
boundary was,
The last sentence is the one thing.
Okay.
I was wrestling with.
okay, let me go back.
Sorry.
What page are you on, Roger? Oh, right, here we
Page
go.
1 of Exhibit A.
Oh, okay, so we did have some discussions, and this kind of ties into the potential waiver. If in that area south of, say, 123rd Street or 127th Street, if there was a portion of that the Army hadn't cleaned up yet, say there was 200 acres that, while this process was going on, that they would be able to subtract that out. And that would be a reason to say, hey, we need to have a waiver that we could go above and beyond that boundary, because there's 200 acres or whatever that number might be, to allow them to have their solar facility to the project extent size, because there are some unknowns about whether all the sites will be cleaned up by the time that they're ready to develop this property.
By including this sentence, it would mean that if there was 200 acres that was south of 123rd they couldn't use, they could go north of 123rd for 200 acres?
Well, they would have to make that appeal to the council, and the council could say no, or
I
they,
question the wisdom of why we have that in there at all.
okay, well,
I mean,
once again,
if it's a variation that they need because of that, then so be it, but, you know, if it's 200 acres that's stuck in the middle between 123rd and 147th or whatever, and it's just in the middle of it, who else is ever gonna develop that?
There's still a lot of buildings down on that south end, isn't there?
yeah, there are some older structures that they used to store munitions in that have not been removed. Most of them are in old foundations that are still there, but
I think I'd like to see that struck.
But once again, this is your ordinance, so if there's something you would like to have stricken or rewritten before it goes to the city council, we certainly can make those appropriate changes.
I think I'd like to see that eliminated. I don't think I like that in there. What if they hit up more than that? I mean, then they can just hop someplace else.
I mean, to me, that's the risk they take by doing that lease that they've got, and if they
aware.
can't get to the property because the Army isn't releasing it, then that's the risk they take.
Exactly. I would agree.
Just curious, also, we talked about roadway preservation, some way that we make sure we have, it's consistent with the roadway grid and our future road development.
Yeah, right now it would be based upon our land use plan where we show those arterials cutting through. Now granted, we also have that,
Page 6 have it?
Page 6 has a utility corridors, road utility corridors.
Oh, I guess I was just struck by the title of that as utility corridors.
okay. I can actually make that clarification in the
I certainly do
text.
think it's important we preserve road corridors through it.
That was one of my concerns, and I saw that was in there, so.
It's a big piece of property. Any other questions for Brad? This is a public hearing item. Anyone who would like to address the planning commission during the public hearing, please come up to the podium and state your name. Name and address, if you don't mind.
Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, Brianna Baca. I'm with Savion. Our address is 422 Admiral Boulevard, Kansas City, Missouri, 64106. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank you all. I know this text ordinance was a bear, so I appreciate all your time and effort into this. I know it's not an easy process, so thank you all, much appreciated. It does not go unnoticed. Second of all, we would like to request that the acreage go back to the original requested 3,000 acreage limit. If you pull up this exhibit, thank you. I also have it printed out. That north 123rd boundary, currently within, because you can see that green, that's the Johnson County. Our acreage is actually 2,130 acres that we can use for solar energy. That's setting back from your road and right-of-ways, as well as streams and wildlife corridors. So we would request that you move that northern boundary back to 119th Street. We've been working with SRL since 2019 on this project. We have submitted into the interconnection queue for 3 years ago, and we're finally just now getting progress on that. So we've got a project size of approximately 424 megawatts of solar. That's not definite, it's definitely proposed. There is nothing set in stone. It is subject to change, but that's our proposed currently in the interconnection queue. This was, SRL approached us, the energy industry in 2019 to have a solar project on this site. And had we known we would have had so little acreage to work with, I'm not sure that we would move forward with this project. Cutting down to 123rd really cuts into the viability and the revenues and the megawatts of the project. As you can see in this map, the northern part of the boundaries, there is not as much Johnson County Parks and Recs on the east and west side. So we do cut a lot of acreage out by moving it down to 123rd Street. The other issue that we have with the 123rd northern boundary is our project is currently looking to interconnect into the proposed Atlantic substation by Evergy that currently sits on 119th Street. If this project were to move forward, we would need facilities and a transmission line minimum. So if we need facilities north of 123rd to interconnect into that substation. If we were to have the 123rd Street as our northern boundary, we would need an overhead transmission line. Currently, we're not contemplating any overhead transmission lines because we can locate right next to that substation. So my request to you all is that we move that northern boundary back to 119th Street, and I'm open for questions, comments, concerns.
Just one question about what you said. So if the boundary was moved to 119th Street, you're saying you'd have 2,100 acres?
No, we'd
Solar.
have a little under 3,000 acres.
I'm sorry, where would the 2,100 come from?
That is if 123rd Street is the northern boundary.
Okay.
It's,
I thought you were citing because of the setbacks and the road requirements and
Yeah.
everything else, you'd only have 2,100 to work with. if you moved to 119th Street.
no, that's if you keep it at 123rd.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So what would your usable acreage be at 119th?
2,800
And that's taking out all the proposed roads and everything?
currently, and that's just from a desktop view. We still haven't done any environmental studies. That doesn't take into the Army, if there's an Army left behind area at all. Now, that being said, we will not go north of 119th Street because that is as far as our lease goes with Sunflower Redevelopment Group.
Under a future land use map, we've talked about a sort of a thoroughfare that would come down through the southern part of the property. Have you seen those plans? Have you seen what we were talking about in terms of access through the southern portion of the property?
Are you talking about this? Sorry, I printed out the same map, so
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry. And I can share this map too as well. It just is the same map that's
Well,
up here.
If you could visualize a road that basically would come down through darn near the center of that, I guess it would align roughly with.
Roger, let me.
So where,
Do you have that?
yeah. Yeah, we have that.
It is on
Yes. Yeah, that has been shared with us.
Okay, limited access roadway, so that's
Yes.
on there.
That's on there, and then just to the east of that, right there, we have a north-south proposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to point out that substation that you referred to is actually, yeah, right,
Yep.
right there, so,
Is it a little notch there, right?
yes, correct.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Did you want a copy of this map? It's the same as that.
Is this the first time that you've mentioned this to staff?
No.
No, we've been meeting for a couple of years now.
No, I mean, that they want to go from basically up to 119th Street.
Oh, yeah, we're familiar with that request, yeah.
I mean, it's not in this proposal though.
Right, yeah, we're not recommending to go to 3,000 acres or 119th. I think the thing from a staff perspective, and if we're uncomfortable with how much land of potential higher and better use, for lack of a better term, I know we've discussed that here at Planning Commission before, what started out at 9,000 acres quickly becomes much smaller. But 2,500 acres of, we've already got 1,300 acres platted, and Panasonic's going on a portion of that. The remainder, what would be north of 119th Street, still 2,500 to 2,700 acres. It's important to keep in mind that is a lot. That's a lot of development. But if you look at in terms of what started out as 9,000, you quickly that whittles down pretty quickly. I think the primary concern from the perspective of capitalizing on economic development, we're trying to play a balance between the need for energy and the actual real economic incentive value that an on-site solar renewable energy source represents in terms of economic development pursuits for larger companies. All these larger companies that are looking at very big investments with lots of high-paying jobs all seek energy credits. They seek they have green energy goals, right? So it's a pretty it would be a significant economic investment tool to be able to market that for this site. The last thing we're balancing is we know we need east-west corridors. We're confident 119th Street's going to be one of those corridors, and what we'd like to do is take advantage of both frontage on both of an infrastructure investment like that. So if it's a quarter mile south or a mile south or exactly where that line is, it'd kind of be a shame if that investment was made and you couldn't take frontage advantage of that invest. So I think that's where the differences are. you know, from at least big picture wise, from staff's perspective, do keep in mind, 1,300 acres is a lot, 2,700 acres is also a lot. There is a legitimate need for just power generation. Our Evergy, you know, our energy partner there, Evergy, you know, does not have unlimited power, transmission and generation capacity to just distribute to any economic development project that comes along in their service area. There are limitations there. That's one of these global limitations that might one day tend to curtail the positive economic development benefits that are possible here. So that's another part of the mechanism that's in play here. So that's why, yeah, we don't necessarily agree with the request, and you know, we're hearing from Brianna that they have a you know, a feasibility issue. You know, they need 424 megawatts out of that, and so that's why the hard decision is here in front of you.
I'm sorry, what was the total number you guys needed? What was the total acreage you needed again?
Just under 3,000.
Okay, to make the deal work.
That's 424 megawatts of solar.
Okay.
And that's what's been submitted into the Southwest Power Pool queue, which is ongoing study now for 3 years. If we were to decrease that, we'd have to amend that or remove that entirely and restart the study. So that's also a consideration. And I'd be remiss if I didn't add that this is a silent revenue generator. This isn't going to create a whole bunch of high-paying jobs, but it's also not going to bring in, it's going to bring in a lot of revenue without necessarily stressing the schools, the roads. You're not going to get a lot of traffic to this area, which is a good or a bad thing, depending on who you ask.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing, so anyone else who'd like to address the planning commission, please approach the podium. Anyone, no one online tonight?
No one online.
Okay.
I have a question. Albert Lightwine, I live on Timber Trails Drive. Question, for all the solar stuff, how's it gonna help DeSoto residents? Are we getting part of that power, or is it being sold to California, Texas, or something?
So I've had the same issue. One of the things we built into this agreement was that a condition of approval would be that a development agreement would have to be negotiated with the city that would including determining franchise fees or equivalent compensation, and depending upon how they do it, it's got to be a good enough deal for the city to do it. We are trusting the city council to do that with this ordinance, as opposed to putting specific criteria in it. But it does need to have, the problem is obviously these solar devices do not generate real estate taxes, or I think they're exempt from personal property taxes as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And so we're putting a large part of our ground on something we won't be collecting tax revenue to help reduce your tax bill and mine too. And it's got to be a good deal for the city. But the way this ordinance is drafted, we've at least put it in there that anybody who wants to make this deal has got to cut a deal on a development agreement with the city to make it.
But we won't see any of the electricity though.
Well, I don't know how that works. I think basically it goes into a grid and it sort of goes to wherever they need it. So
Okay.
that'd be my guess.
Yeah, there's a number of ways it can be done. So the application that Brianna was discussing was to sell to the grid that could be transmitted anywhere, regionally or locally, or I assume nationally even. There's also a possibility for what they call a back of the meter deal, where power from this field is sold directly on site, either to a big user, to the industrial areas. That's a possibility. We just don't have those answers right now.
So really none of it is for residential use then, so help us on our power bill and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, other than having power available, which hopefully reduces the supply, reduces the cost, but I mean,
Okay.
that'd be true with a coal-fired power plant too, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay, that's what I thought, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
didn't sign in, but my name's Rod Northway, Senior VP with Savion Solar. And I did want to address a little bit about the economic benefits of the solar farm. 424 megawatts is what we contemplated back in 2019 when SRL approached us and said, hey, we've got tracts of land out here in the sunflower ammunition plant development that we think will work good for solar. It's, not on the outer roads and inside. So we took a look at it and we said, okay, well, this is kind of a gamble because, the Army hasn't cleaned up all the tracks yet. But we took that based on 424 megawatts, which equates to a little over $500 million investment and over 40 million of tax revenue over 30 years. And like Brianna mentioned, the beautiful thing about renewable projects and solar, take it either way, doesn't create a lot of jobs, but there's no stress on the school system, there's no stress on infrastructure, we don't use water. So it's a huge shot in the arm, as Brianna said, a silent revenue generator for the city. So I just want to make clear that we're taking a gamble here, and any reduction in the acres is a reduction in our feasibility. We're looking at 2027 as the Army cleans up the site and as our Southwest Power Pool interconnection requests and the studies transpire that we can actually sign a generation agreement to connect to the grid is a long play here for us. So we appreciate your consideration and appreciate your ordinance. You all did a great job, and we just need just a little more elbow room if we can. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so when will you start the project? 2027?
So, Brianna, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to go through a transmission interconnection study request to, as we are an independent power producer, to inject megawatts on the grid, whether you're renewable, gas, coal, or whatever. And so we filed that, and we signed the lease in late 19, filed in 2020. The study just started about 6 months ago. It's going to take another couple years to get through the study. It's going to take a year to build. So that gets you a commercial operation date about 2027. Yes, sir.
I have a question. One of the things that I'm wrestling with is whether we should give up our 119th Street corridor for this project. And I understand what you're saying, that there's certain requirements that you have as well. I'm wondering if you can't build what you need to build and still allow us to use that 119th Street corridor. It's hard to describe today because we don't have 120th Street, or
Right.
122nd Street, or something.
Well, we'd like
that.
just to work with you on that instead of having a hard line. As Brianna said, excuse me, but the proposed substation that we're connecting to is right here. So if you cut us off, that's going to be problematic. I mean, right now, if we can build up above this 123rd Street, all of our infrastructure will be underground, connect right into the new substation. It's a very clean project. So we can definitely work with you guys. We don't have to go, right up to 119th.
I'm just, since there is underground connections, I assume you could do it by easements as well, right?
We could, but we already have a lease that gets us up there now. So we leased the property
Yeah, I
that was
understand.
available to
You
us.
leased the property
I
without
know.
having actual authority to build it,
But
so we're
we
trying to
could.
work with
I
it.
got it. Yes, sir, we can. Just a little give and take. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, Brianna, we're at, right now, our lease is down to 2,800 acres. And that gets us to 424 megawatts. And if we can get there, Sunflower's going to be happy because they're going to maintain their expected lease revenues from our project. We're going to be happy because if we get our expected revenues, we're taking a gamble on this site. And projects like commercial industrials are going to be happy because they will have the opportunity to buy from our project through a power purchase agreement. We're wholesale power producers. We inject our megawatts into the transmission line, but we can enter into, again, long-term energy agreements with commercial and industrial customers that are now all seeking renewable energy to meet their corporate carbon reduction goals. So this is going to be a magnet for further development, no matter what. So that's the other side of economic development that Mike was alluding to. We're getting 50. When I started in this business 15, 17 years ago, 100% of the opportunity for us to sell wholesale power was to utility companies. Now, 60% of our opportunity is selling to corporates and industrials through power purchase agreements. So it's changed.
Is a 30-year term something you absolutely need in order to make this work, or is it possible?
Actually, these are financed over 42 years, so 30 years is problematic for us, to tell you the truth. Typically, and Emily can address this much better than I, our environmental permitting VP back there, we go through conditional use permits all across the country. We're one of the largest developers in the United States from coast to coast with over 20,000 megawatts in development, solar and storage. The metro areas, I think it started with Johnson County, was the first time we've ever seen a CUP with a term limit. So it is problematic for us. 30 years is really stretching us. Again, the investors in these projects look at financials over 42 years, not 15 or 20.
Again, I'm just thinking of ways we can help address our concerns about 119th corridor.
Gotcha.
If there was a shorter time period that if things do develop, we at least have the opportunity to develop that would be somewhat of a comfort.
Yeah.
But 30 is what you need.
Minimum. Okay. Yes, sir. With hopefully, as long as the plan is operating within the requirements of the CUP, that it's extended. Because again, these facilities are financed on 42 years at this point.
Anybody else have any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else would like to address the Planning Commission on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and it's up for discussion. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I honestly, I think I'd be comfortable moving it to 121st Street because they could still access that corner of where the future plant's going to potentially be. And then that would still retain that 119th corridor. I know it doesn't get them the acreage they want, but it does give them some, and it retains. I see what Mike's saying. I mean, it's going to be 2057 before it's a long ways out there.
Yeah, it is.
I'd be a little leery about going all the way to 119.
Any other comments, discussion?
Personally, I'm still looking at 127th Street. It's still a lot of land to be given up.
Well, I think the applicant made good points as well, though, that this is actually a benefit to facilitate development for the rest of the property, because if you have ready power, that'll help. And I do know that there's the problems with Evergy in terms of trying to service the kinds of businesses that we're talking about putting there. If this would help reduce the load and that they don't jack my energy prices as a result, I'm good with that. So, I mean, I think there's some benefit that goes along with it, and I don't discount that. And remember too, that, I mean, despite the fact that the applicant has a lease on this property, as far as I know, we would be the only municipality probably anywhere around the metro area that would allow for solar development of this size in their community. And we have a unique piece of property to do it with. But, I mean, this is a first.
I mean, that is 100. I mean, that's a quarter. Is that a quarter mile from 119?
It's a quarter mile from 121st. Yeah, the numbers are eighth mile each. Yeah.
I mean, my instinct tells me to go with staff's recommendation of 120 on this, and to the extent that it needs to be negotiated, something different than that, that's a city council issue.
I think I'm with Justin. I don't see an issue maybe going to 121st, keeping that corridor open for 119th. Kind of, it's a little bit of a compromise, I guess, right?
Yep.
Like he says, that still allows them to get to that substation. Just my thoughts, but.
Other than the project area and the definition there used, I mean, I do believe that the sentence at the end of the project extent ought to come out. The offset for if the Army's got problems cleaning it up, I don't think that we need to be in that business. Are you okay with a 30-year term? Okay. So, I would propose that we make the modification to the definition of product extent by removing that last sentence. Anybody second that?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then the other question then is changing the boundary from 123rd to 121st. That's, I believe, a proposal. You want to vote on that?
That's fine. Just make a motion on that then?
Yeah.
Make a motion, we change the northern boundary to 121st Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I feel like 123rd is the maximum, but.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, was there,
There was one.
I wanted to make sure there was one no.
Schultz.
in that.
Schultz was
Okay,
a nay.
thank you, just wanted to clarify that.
Let the record reflect, he is the naysayer.
Somebody's gotta do it.
With those changes then, do we feel comfortable sending this to city council? Would someone like to move?
I'll make a motion that we send the, public hearing on, or excuse me, the utility solar development regulations to city council for approval with the recommended changes.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call for a vote?
Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Huggins. He is absent. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is any old business. Apparently there's none.
Oh, there's another public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
5B. Public hearing to consider rezoning at the northeast corner of Ottawa Street in Lexington from C2 to R3. Note that Commissioners Manson and Milburn are recusing themselves from the discussion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you have noted, you have an application to rezone the track at the northeast corner of Lexington Avenue and Ottawa Street. It's directly south of the Possum Creek development. The applicant, Joe Roy from All In Enterprises, is here tonight. He's also the developer of the Possum Creek project. The rezoning application was submitted the 26th of January to change from C2 to R3. All the appropriate information as far as ownership affidavits, notification letters, public hearing notification in the legal record, and a sign's been placed on the property have all been taken care of. We've met several times with the applicant to discuss this rezoning, and as of the day of this memo, staff has not heard any comments from the public regarding this proposed action. I'll go through the review of the general zoning requirements. The property is currently zoned commercial, business general. This is considered a down zoning to R3. The predominant zoning district in the area is RH. That's the kind of lighter orange I guess maybe brownish, light tan, I guess, along Ottawa Street, Wea Street. The reason that the hatched area is right above the subject property is because that's actually part of the Uptown Overlay District. So it was an RH district, but during the course of the site plan approval, the applicant asked for that overlay district to be applied. That gave them a little bit more flexibility for the type of houses being built there. The existing land uses considered single-family homes. There is one multifamily apartment complex, yeah, right there where Mike's got the cursor. It is in the RH district, so it is grandfathered in. It's a non-conforming use, but it is there and it is operational as an apartment complex. As you can see, south of Lexington Avenue is a fairly large commercial area and also a little bit of residential low density. Actually, it's part of the old trailer park that's down there off of Lexington. So you can see on the aerial photo, it shows the commercial areas to the south and also the subject property as well. Moving to the zoning compatibility factors, character of the neighborhood. As I'd mentioned, it's primarily single-family residential with one multifamily complex unit along Ottawa Street. This project is considered infill. It is a project, it's been vacant, obviously, and it is just south of the original platted area of DeSoto. So it's been around within the platted area of DeSoto or near the platted area of DeSoto since the city was founded back in the 1800s, late 1800s. Compatibility of the proposed zoning permitted uses therein. I feel like the proposed zoning is more in line with the surrounding zoning than commercial. If you look at our land use plan and actually what's going on there, staff believes that the area south is more suited for commercial development than this sort of spot to the north of Lexington Avenue. Suitability to which the property has been restricted under its existing zoning. The existing zoning certainly does not exempt the property from being developed or used. However, in the past 5 years, there have been no proposals or serious proposals for developing this property into a commercial use. As I said, I feel like staff's putting its best that the C2 commercial is best suited on the south side of Lexington Avenue. The property has been vacant for many years, and as I mentioned, no commercial development has been proposed for the past 5. The extent that there's a need in the community for the uses allowed by the proposed zoning, as you all are well aware that there's been a lot of proposals for additional housing. We've got a large employer coming to town, and allowing for multifamily and residential lots will help increase our population density. It's also in the older part of town. It's an infill project, which is something that staff certainly recommends that the Planning Commission move forward with. Subject property is within an area of access to utilities and infrastructure. Actually, when the Possum Creek development was put in, a lot of infrastructure was put in anticipation of a project being in this area. At that time, it was still up in the air whether a developer wanted it to be commercial or residential. But as things have transpired recently, since the announcement of Panasonic, that sort of put the thumb on the scale to move towards residential development. So utilities are in place at this location. I don't believe that the police, fire, public schools will see any change in previous conditions. The extent which is allowed with the proposed zoning would adversely affect the capacity of the street network. It's actually lower than our density requirements. As you know, we just increased that to 24 units per acre, so this won't be anywhere close to that amount of dwelling units per acre. Also, parking would be required to be on site, so there will be no parking on the street. One thing I wanted to point out to you is this, and we get to the site plan, but that street is now an alley. It will be converted to a public street with curbs and gutters when we talk about that in the site plan. So that's just a little FYI for you. Staff doesn't believe there will be any environmental harm based on the change from commercial to multifamily R3. Economic impact on the community is certainly beneficial. The property is currently underutilized, it's vacant, so there's very little tax revenue being generated. Certainly adding development will increase the value of the property and also increase the tax revenue not only to the city, but the school district, the fire district, the county as well. The extent to which the zoning may detrimentally affect the nearby property, staff believes there won't be any detrimental effects. There is already a multifamily development in this location or nearby. As we talked about at our previous meeting, we do have some multifamily developments scattered within the the RH district. So part of the thing with the R3 is to try to blend as best possible. When you look at our definition of what R3 is, it should blend with the multifamily and duplexes as best possible. And we will obviously get into some of those issues with the site plan later tonight, if the recommendation is to move forward. Relative gain of the public health, safety, and welfare from a denial. We don't feel like there will be anything to gain from the adjacent neighborhoods in denying this application. And then consistency with the comprehensive plan. Actually, the land use plan does show this as mixed use, so that was kind of this debate, commercial, residential, and so the land use plan does show it as mixed use, but certainly are comfortable with the proposed development or rezoning to R3 multifamily. And then finally, recommendation of professional staff is to recommend approval of the rezoning request to the Planning Commission. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Questions for Brad? Brad, I've got a question. Page 4, under 3C, statement of the staff's opinion that C2 is best suited on the south side of Lexington Avenue. What's that based upon?
Well, that's where we've got, the existing sort of strip mall, if you will. JT's is there. Steve's Meat Market. A lot of those types of facilities have been on the south side. And that's kind of the direction we're going. That former old DeSoto self-storage building, which now thankfully has been torn down, was a location on the south side of Lexington. So with this one little spot north, just felt like it was better suited to have the commercial on the south side of Lexington. But once again, there was some debate whether back and forth and obviously it was zoned commercial at some point quite a while ago. So there was certainly some discussion prior to my time here why
the front's a thoroughfare.
Yeah.
It kind of makes some sense that it would be
Correct.
commercial as opposed to residential.
But once the Possum Creek development really filled in that area to the north, felt like that, and with the strong need for housing in DeSoto, it felt like it was just a better opportunity to have the R3 versus the commercial in that area.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing, so at this time, anyone who would like to address this proposed rezoning from the northeast corner of Ottawa Street in Lexington from C2 to R3, please address the Planning Commission from the podium. Still no one online.
Still no one online.
Seeing no comment, I'll close the public hearing, and the matter's up for discussion.
I think it'll be a good fit for right in there.
Pretty good.
Have they done a traffic study on exiting onto Lexington?
No, not in connection with this project.
Okay.
It probably wouldn't necessarily be appropriate under the zoning to talk about that.
But just for my information.
Yeah, right.
You need a motion?
I think so.
Motion to request or to rezone from C2 business to R3 residential multifamily.
Second.
Moved and second.
Recommend approval to the council.
Yeah, we recommend approval of rezoning. That's what you meant, right?
Right. And send to the city council.
Any further discussion? Shall we vote? Okay.
Garrett,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 6 under old business, it says none. I assume that's true. Anybody else have any old business? So we want to call back the other commissioners?
Yes.
Before we move to 7A?
I can go get it if you want to, either way. Okay.
Item 7A, consider final plat for Carriage Houses Phase 12 as new business.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tract L includes 2 buildings that were approved by the Planning Commission at the December meeting. The site plan, that is. So before you now is the final plat for these buildings. As you know, the process that we go for is when the site plan has been approved, the applicant will submit a final plat that outlines the boundary location of the building, and then once the structures are built, they will conduct a second survey where the walls are so they can get down the exact square foot for the properties that will be sold, because as the actual units, the garages are being sold individually. So there will be a replat following this, but before building permits are issued, a final plat needs to be approved by the Planning Commission. And if approved by the Planning Commission, the plat will go forward to the City Council for acceptance of easements and rights-of-way. Like I said, this has been a process that we've been through many times, so staff recommends approval of the final plat.
Any questions for Brad? Any questions for the applicant, if the applicant is here? Seeing none. Discussion. Concerns?
Been through this a few times before already.
Yeah.
The only thing, didn't we have something about checking a flood study or something like that? Contingent upon? Was that something at one point we had like, we passed?
Well, they have filled in the property. Part of it was in the floodplain, but they've gone through the process of obtaining a fill permit.
But this is consistent with the preliminary plat we saw, though.
Well, of the site plan, yes.
Site plan.
That was all I remembered. Some question about a study of downstream flow and filling in that area, what impacts that had on upstream. If any. So, but if there's no concerns, I'm good.
Looking for a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we submit the final plat to the city council for acceptance.
A second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call for vote.
Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 7B, consider site plan for residences at Cottage Creek. Again, Commissioners Manson and Milburn are excusing themselves.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is the site plan for the location that you previously recommended to the City Council for the rezoning approval. Joe Roy, representing All In Enterprises, is a developer, and the plan is to construct 4 townhome buildings with 21 total dwelling units. In accordance with our zoning regulations, the site plan application is under review by and approval by the Planning Commission. All the application materials have been are attached as Exhibit A. All the fees have been paid. The site plan includes the site plan itself, the landscape plan, building elevations. You also have an interior layout of the apartments and some architectural information that's a little bit above and beyond what we usually look at, but it was part of the site plan submittal. The project, and this is a key point, it ties directly to that public alley that serves the cottages at Possum Creek. And the one thing that I want to make sure that you understand is this now will become a public street. the road that goes behind the cottages at Possum Creek is considered an alley. And this will now be a public street with public names. So they'll be addressed off these interior roads. And with that, curbs and gutters, sidewalks will be required within this development. As you can see, at the very, very northern end, that's where that tie-in occurs. And so it's a little bit different situation, but it works pretty well. And we've met with the applicant several times on how to best tie these two developments together. As you can see also, there's a fairly significant landscape group of plantings to the north. And also that last lot at Possum Creek is a little bit wider than the other ones. So there is a buffer between that northern single-family residence and the southern, or the first, actually that's a nineplex, that dwelling or that building unit. Site plan does include 4 buildings, a 5-plex, a 4-plex, a 3-plex, and a 9-plex with associated parking. They're about 1,300, a little bit over 1,300 square feet each, and there'll be 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths in each unit. Each unit has 2 parking spaces, which is a garage, and there will be one street side. This does exceed our requirements for the R3 district. Each unit will have individual trash containers, therefore no community dumpster is provided. The landscape plan is actually shown on the site plan. As you can see the tree locations on blue. There is a planting plan that is included in the site plan or on the document itself, which meets our requirements. Photometric plan is not needed. The lighting is typical to residential standards in this area. No stormwater detention is needed as the site drains directly into the floodplain. As you can see, barely part of Cedar Creek, right, or pardon me, Kill Creek, on the bottom part of the screen there. Also, public improvements include the tying in the existing sanitary sewer water lines on site. Sidewalks will be added as on the site plan, running along the newly formed north-south public street and also east-west, tying into Ottawa Street. As far as the review of the site plan submittal, the architectural standards, there are elevations included in your packet, what these buildings will look like. Reviewed those items with the applicant, and they meet our standards for development. As you can see there, there's a mix of stonework and also recessed areas, different pitches of the roof, and some different treatments within the pediment areas of the buildings as well. So it does meet our architectural standards. Signage, no signage has been requested with this project. The landscape plan is included on the site plan itself. Also, one thing noted, we talked with the developer about adding a gazebo, a fire pit, or some sort of feature in that. You can see it on that green dot in the lower left corner, a feature for the residents to have in that location. One thing also on that site plan is you can see this orange area, a vacation right away on Lexington Avenue and Ottawa Street is being requested to allow for the proper setbacks for the buildings themselves. Staff has reviewed this proposal and feel like the future plans for Lexington Avenue will allow for a widened road, and that the request for the additional vacated property is reasonable. This process has not gone before the City Council yet, but we will request a 10-foot utility easement along the vacated portion of the property along Lexington Avenue. With that, I will stand for any questions you may have. As I said, the applicant is here tonight, and we recommend approval to the Planning Commission of the residents of Cottage Creek site plan.
Any questions for Brad?
What size is the water line that drains that property into Kill Creek?
You're talking about the water line that goes?
I'm sorry, the drain line that goes underneath Lexington there.
Oh gosh, you might have got me on that one. I know we looked at that when we did the initial development with Possum Creek. So it was sized back then, Mike, if you
I think
can,
it's a 4x4 box, or maybe a 4x, I couldn't say for sure, but it's pretty, it's bigger than 36. Yeah.
We'll make sure we wouldn't start causing a backup.
So if I'm looking at the elevation of what I think is the largest of these buildings.
yeah, and they will all be similar in their makeup as far as the stone and the,
So I'm counting front doors and I count 8. But it says it's a 9-plex.
That's just a remnant of, I can make that a duplex, I can make it a 10-plex. I can do whatever, you know, whatever we wanna do with that, we can just cut one off and just add to it, so it's
So it's just
showing what the outside would look like.
generally what it looks like. Okay.
And we can make it into any size, if we want.
I assume if it's 9, you just add one more to the end, or how would it?
Yeah, that's the whole purpose, is that they'll be the exact same for the you know, the 5-plex, the 4-plex, they'll look the same.
Joe, if you don't mind,
yeah.
come to the podium because we have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Good to see you, by the way. At least I have a couple more questions. So are these are all 1-car garage, 3-bedroom design?
Correct.
Okay. And do we have any on-site parking in addition to that?
We don't have any proposed.
Okay.
Don't really have room.
Yeah, so what does one of your tenants do if they've got 2 cars?
Well, one will go in the garage,
Okay.
okay, and then one will be parked out
Okay, so
on the
you've got
driveway
enough
itself.
room on the
Yes,
driveway that you
yes,
can have a
yes.
second car out.
Right, yeah, yeah.
They have 3 cars, they're out of luck.
3 cars, we got a problem. And some of these units, all the ones on the east side, there is a capability that we could put a 4th bedroom in those, because we can go down and dig the basement and put in another bedroom down there also. So the good thing about that plan that I gave you, you can do a lot of things with that. Okay, so you could have 2 bedrooms upstairs, you could have 1 bedroom downstairs. It's the way that you have it. There's 2 small bedrooms up and a master up, but you do have the capability, because those will be a walkout, that we could add square footage to them if needed.
What's been your experience at Possum Creek in terms of people having visitors over, and where do they park?
You know, we've been real lucky with that. We have had I have had a conversation with one person that lives there that parking on the street in the alley. But we have, knock on wood, we have had no problems whatsoever. Everybody parks in their driveways. And I have talked to those people, and they said that they didn't realize that they couldn't park on the alley. And it really doesn't say they can't, but it was just a known thing that we don't do that because, you know, it's an alley. So, but all in all, we have had very good luck with that.
And I'm assuming that one of the recommendations would probably be that there's no parking along the street, the one that connects to Lexington.
I don't know. I don't know that would be the case.
Okay.
I think, you know, this is the new streets will be city standard 28 foot wide. And so we allow on-street parking on those. So there's opportunities here on the west side of the north-south street on this section here.
Yeah.
And then on the north side of the east-west street for some spillover, if you will, on-street parking there. I don't know that we'd necessarily disallow that.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Joe? Or am I the only one that's yelling?
You're the only one. They look good, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You bet.
Well, this is not a public hearing item, so I guess we'll just open it up for discussion.
I don't have anything.
I think it looks good, seems to make sense for that area.
I guess I should ask, is there anyone who wishes to address the planning commission on this issue? Okay,
I got a question.
sure.
Okay.
Sorry, please approach the podium and give us your name and address.
Has the people on Wea and Ottawa Street been notified of all this, that they're gonna put in these? I mean, you're opening up a whole new raft of stuff there with traffic going up behind that alley. And you're gonna put in a street there to go to an alley. Do those people in Possum Creek know they're gonna have all this coming through there?
Well, they all would have been notified within 200 feet of the property when we did the rezoning, which you heard earlier tonight.
Right, okay.
So I think that was notification, whether
But I
or not they
mean,
know
but-
about it, I don't know, that's up to them, I guess.
But you know, I mean, like Wea and Ottawa Street, have they been notified also? Cause it does affect the traffic on those streets.
I think there was a list.
The requirement's 200 feet from the
200
property.
feet, yeah, so that wouldn't be much of Wea or Ottawa. I'm not sure where that buffer extends, but not every resident on those streets.
Okay. Just curious.
Thank you for your question.
Mr. Chairman, can we get his name?
I'm sorry, we do need your name for the record.
Yeah, at least the name.
Paul Penner.
Paul Penner?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the matter's before the planning commission for discussion. Any other comments? Perhaps a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan for the residences of Cottage Creek for the construction of 4 townhome buildings.
Second that.
And this is a motion to approve, not to recommend approval.
Yeah, this is the approving body.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote?
Garrett,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
and carries.
Thank you. So, I think one of our commissioners can come back now.
If they behave themselves, they wouldn't get put in timeout.
Next item on our agenda is item 7C, consider preliminary plat for the residences at Eagle Creek. Again, this is not a public hearing item.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a preliminary plat for the residences at Eagle Creek. The property is zoned R2 residential medium density. Developer of the property is Joe Roy from All In Enterprises. Joe is in the audience tonight if you'd like to ask him any questions. There are 27 lots total in this property. The developer will install utilities, sewer. It's part of a benefit district, so sewers and all those requirements are developer driven, and they are responsible for the installation of those items. Staff did a technical review, which is included in your staff report. We also met with the applicants several times regarding this development. Also, the applicant has met with several of the residences along the west side of the property. And also I've gotten several calls about residents wanting to attend and understand a little bit better about how the preliminary plat would be administered and how the approval process moves forward with the planning commission. As you can see in your staff report, we go through our typical review of all this, which includes my review, Chet Belcher, our city engineer's review, and then Mike also takes a crack at it as well. We've gone through this several times. This is part of a development that was approved initially in 2005, right around there. It never moved forward beyond the early planning stages. So the preliminary plat now is before the planning commission now some 15 or so years later. With that, we'll stand for any questions you may have. I do have some items in the suggested Conditions for approval, which is to update the drainage study to confirm the need for that detention pond at 87th and Primrose. And then also, I'd like to add something that tracks A, B, and C encompass the drainage and tree preservation easement is added to the condition of approval. There's also a trail that runs on those tracks, at least tracks A and B from Primrose, and then ties into 87th Street. I actually walked that trail this morning. It's in a little bit rough condition, but it is a nice feature back there. That is property that is owned by the applicant. As I understand it, they intend to leave those areas as is, but as far as the tree preservation easement, I think it'd be a good idea to have that as a overlay on top of those properties. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have. The next step in the process would be for them to submit a final plat, which would come before the Planning Commission. Oh, I also want to point out there will be sidewalks added along the newly formed drive, also extended on 87th Street, and the sidewalks will go up around the cul-de-sac. So you also can see we have tree plantings that are required with the preliminary plat, street trees that do go in as well. From staff's perspective, it's a pretty straightforward approval process. This is not something that's new. It's been around for a while. It's, like I said, this development started many years ago, and this portion of the project never fully developed, and it is zoned R2, which allows for duplexes in this area. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Brad, if I may.
Sure.
You have actually a second item that you're recommending as a condition, first being the update the drainage study, and the second would be donate a preservation easement.
Yes, for tracks A, B, and C. And those are the two long, slender tracks, and then that tract where the detention pond itself is.
It just didn't make that into the report.
That is correct. That's something that Mike, Chet, and I discussed prior to the meeting and felt as we were looking at the grading plan, and it does, some of the grading gets close to, there's a meandering creek that goes through there, and I want to make sure that creek stays undisturbed as possible.
Thank you. Any other questions for Brad?
Brad, could you give me that one? I want to make sure I get that clear. Can you
Okay, that tracks A, B, and C, a drainage and tree preservation easement be added to the conditions of approval.
Okay.
What was the name of this before?
I think it was part of the Cherokee, Cedar Ridge West.
So it was originally part of Cedar Ridge West. It was like a second plat.
It was a future phase of the Cedar Ridge West.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
But that was single family at that time, wasn't it?
It is always, well, I started in 2000. It's been zoned R2 since then.
Is that
Even
right?
the
So maybe
existing
it was.
is zoned R2. There just never were anything other than single family constructed there.
Any other questions?
Not really. It's been approved for a long time, so we're not changing anything.
So this matter is not a public hearing, but obviously there's folks in the audience who are interested in this. I would suggest that we allow people to address the planning commission. Keep your comments to 2 minutes and maybe put a 15-minute time limit on all of this, but there's no reason not to be heard. Any objection?
No, I agree.
So I'd ask, would you please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record?
I'm Karen Rogers, and I own part of 8660 Pinner and 8640 Pinner. And it was supposed to be, back in the 90s, single-family houses. Because when I plotted out my grandpa's place, they had me get in the benefit district of that. We paid for sewer then through the benefit district and never got benefit from it. I think all I want is sewer like I was supposed to have in the very beginning, and no grinder pumps and no septic, and for it to be single family, just like it was supposed to be in the 90s when they started it to begin with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Candace Gwillan. I live at 8339 Primrose Street, which is a little farther down on the track. Kind of my concern is the fact that you are addressing, I appreciate the fact that you are looking at some trees left in there, because I did go to the Arbor Foundation and depending on the trees and the size of the trees, they move 10 to 150 gallons of water per day dispersed, which is dispersed in the air. And an average tree intercepts 2,830 gallons of water during rainfall each year. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of trees that are going to be cleared out of there, and also soil moved, which is holding moisture. And trees also benefit by detoxifying toxins, taking pollutants out of the air and out of the ground. I mean, there's overflow from cattle coming down there. It helps purify some of that drainage from the cattle coming down in there. So as you go farther on down, you understand they're putting in drainage, but it goes into 2 lakes coming down there. And the first lake, the dam on that first lake is breaking down, rocks are falling, and I have taken pictures, which you're welcome to have and look at. That support system needs to be looked at and evaluated before we start dumping a whole lot more water in it, because we have already felt the increase in flooding due to the athletic facility being put in already. These dams have had overflows and breaching due to that already, without a bunch of cement being put in there. And I understand we need housing and fitting housing in there, but I would like to see more areas of green areas, or areas where trees are left to help prevent some of the flooding. The second dam going down is a private lake that is paid for by residents that live there. The dam has recently been built and financed by the HOA and the owner of the dam. And I assume the dam that was built to handle the current flooding without a bunch of trees and a lot of landscape occurring or changing. The overflow, the pictures you'll see there also show the overflow of that current dam. And the overflow has a tremendous amount of water that has flowed already a couple times this last year. And if you look at where the overflow and the water goes, it flows around the east side of the dam, goes down to and hits a railroad track system before it turns east. So we need to make sure that we do evaluate the first dam, that it's not being breached as often as it is now. Evidence of the breaching is also the fact that there's a lot of logs that have backed up against the trees that have been allowed to grow in that first area, because it's come over and it's on top of the trees, which could also break and disrupt the dam of the first lake.
Thank you, Ms.
So we just need to look at. Thanks.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Pullen provided some written comments.
I'll need a copy of that.
Okay, I'm back. My name's Paul Pinner. We own the property to the south,
Do you have an address for me, Paul?
8700 Pinner Avenue.
Thank you.
And I feel that putting in duplexes is going to hurt the value of my property. And I think single family units ought to be put there and not duplexes. And that's my opinion. Unless Joe wants to go ahead and pay for what damage he might do by putting in duplexes and give me some money or something, I might, but no.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Darren Rohr, 8600 Pinner. We moved in 6 years ago, built that house. We were told everything was going to be single family homes behind them. We always knew that was going to be developed. duplexes aren't gonna help our property value. We already fight with them getting our property values right. And then also, we were also told that eventually we would get sewer there. So I want to make sure, again, with us, we were supposed to get sewer whenever they developed that. We had to put a grinder pump in. So I don't like it shouldn't be, it should be single family home back there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Winslow, 8454 Frederick Court, and I'm going to champion in on the same topic there. I think it would be better suited for single-family residential. My concern is for traffic. You put duplexes in there, we're going to double up on 2 to 3 cars per unit. 87 or 27 units, 5,400. You start doing the math pretty soon, you got 100 some cars that are all dumping out on 87th Street. All of our neighborhoods have to exit into town on 87th Street, and 87th to Penner already is backing up with the schools now having the access to the high school parking lot. All the buses, all the high school students are coming down there. Obviously, the intersection at Penner and Lexington, we can't do anything about that because of its configuration. And the roundabout is unfortunately not helping very much. It's double loaded on northbound traffic, so northbound traffic has complete control of the roundabout in the mornings, and southbound traffic just backs up all the way almost to Penner. So I would ask for your consideration to consider requesting it be single family residential versus duplex. Thank you.
Got a few more minutes. Anybody else? Well, Joe.
I bought a piece of ground that was owned R2 for duplexes. Okay. I didn't change that. I bought it knowing that I could do that. Most of you people in here know me. I'm not going to put up junk. I'm not anything that I have something to do with. I do not put up junk. Okay. I'm not going to, put up shacks and all this kind of stuff. I understand that nobody likes change, but I have addressed Karen's issue about the sewer. You're going to get a sewer. Okay. I don't have to, I don't think, because we couldn't find it anywhere, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it for McDaniels too. Okay. So from what I can gather, there's 4. I'm not sure about you. I don't know. What I do know is that when we went to the county, okay, it didn't say anything in there about, I asked Ronnie if he had a paper, because.
Again, Steve Chet was always good at just saying everything, but he never
Okay.
backed anything up.
Okay, so.
It was just the Duffy estate that got on the bench.
Okay, I don't know that. I don't know that, but what I have agreed to, which I think that is more than fair, is that I have agreed and I have told the engineers that I will put you and Marty and his dad on the sewer, both of your houses, okay? Sir, I'm not sure about you, okay, because you sit so low, okay? I don't know whether it can be done, okay?
I'm higher than the neighbor that was part of that plot too.
Well,
The Harveys.
I'm talking about 4 houses.
Right.
I'm talking about Marty, I'm talking about Ronnie, and I'm talking about Karen's 2, okay? I do not want to be hard to get along with, Somebody else could have bought this ground and done the same thing. I think that since I am a DeSoto guy, and I have a lot of investments in DeSoto, Kansas, that you would much rather have me do it than somebody else do it. Somebody that comes out of town, that comes in here and is going to do it, I employ 45 people. Probably 15 or 20 of them are from DeSoto. I own Freedom Concrete. I'm the J of the JTs. I've been around DeSoto a long time. And I am not going to put up junk. Paul, I'm not going to put up junk. You might think I am.
I understand.
No,
I understand that, but the thing is what I'm trying to get across to you so you understand is in the future, whether you put up junk or not, there's still duplexes. And
And you-
duplexes turn in, just what the gentleman said, more traffic, more a little bit of everything. Joe.
Okay, I'm
You
gonna
don't live
put,
there. You don't
I'm,
live there, you live in Baser.
okay, but I have more investments in DeSoto, Kansas than probably anybody in this room.
That's good. I'm proud of
Okay,
you. Yeah.
so,
If I could, this is an opportunity for you to express your comments to the planning
Okay,
commission.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
I appreciate the fact that you've got this going on, and I think that dialogue is very helpful, but that's really not this forum.
okay,
So I think you've made good points,
Okay.
as everyone has.
okay. Yeah, I know they don't like change, but someday, the people that live down there, they knew it was coming. You know,
Thank you, Jim.
and I really believe that they would rather have a local guy do it than somebody from California that don't care about anybody in this room.
Thank you.
Well, you all know me, I'm Ron McDaniel. I've lived on that corner up there since 1963. I bought my property from the original owner, Mr. Brady. I should have bought it all, but I didn't have the money back in that days. I could hardly pay for what I bought. But along comes, and all these people are mad because they're going to build duplex. I don't care if he builds tents if they take care of them. I've lived there. I've watched all those houses being built back behind me. Didn't help me, but they put the sewer in my front yard to take care of these people's sewer, and they promised me sewer at that time. Well, what they did when they put it in, and my brother-in-law put it in, they brought it up to my house and stopped it, and it was free fall, but I couldn't get on it. So here I am, what is it, 2013 or 2023? I had to buy my own pump and put my own sewer in because the city didn't go through it, and they stopped Joanne from building back there. I will tell you this: there was a time in about 2003 when Joanne that owned this property. She had it surveyed, had it plotted, had a big machine back of my house getting ready to put the sewer in, and we, the city, stopped her from doing it. And I'll never understand that, but that's a long time ago. And she was going to build houses, I don't know what kind, but she didn't because she got stopped. She went bankrupt, we had to bail her out. When I was on the city council, we bailed her out, okay? Anyway, I don't care what Joe builds there because I know what he builds. I'm the guy on the corner that's been taken advantage of since way back. And I don't care what he builds because I know he'll take care of it and clean it up because it's been a god-awful mess for a long time. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
I will say, Roger, I am going to put a homes association on this, so all the houses will be mowed, all of them will be trimmed, all of them will be painted. You're not going to have a duplex that's
Not done.
brown on this side and green on this side. So I'll take care of the roof. It's going to have the roofs, the painting, and all the landscaping, and I do believe that will help take care of the property value.
Thank you.
I have one other thing to talk about. When they built that, Thompson's built a pond right down the street, a retaining pond to catch that water coming off on Penner's property back over there. But I was told then that they put it in a wrong spot. It should have been put way on down the line on north. And then the water could come through there and it wouldn't do what that woman's got a problem with. That should have been put on down there, but it wasn't. I've never seen the water in there.
Thank you. This will be our last comment, if you don't mind.
Good evening. My name is Toby Jackson, 8501 Primrose. I'm downstream from all of this, and I know, according to the Johnson County AIM site, there is future flood conditions that come really close to my property. Just kind of curious of the impact, what that would have for those of us back on the north side of that development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your comments. I believe the matter is before the Planning Commission for discussion. If I could point out a couple things before we get too far down the road. Looks like recommendation number 1 of updating the drainage study is probably a pretty important issue. So I think the staff got it right. That needs to happen before we get this done. The second on the preservation easement on tracks A, B, and C, I assume, Joe, you don't have any objection to that. And that I think helps with the idea of a buffer and
I mean,
keeping
that
green
trail that goes
space.
through there, people's got fire pits, they've got all that stuff. I
Okay.
don't care, because I'm not doing anything, I'm doing everything on the other side of the creek. So
Right.
that doesn't bother me at all.
As far as attaching folks to the sewer and forcing this developer to do that, and I don't know how any of that works, and I don't know that that's our place. But I certainly understand it, and it sounds like you all understand it, so hopefully there's a way to get that done to your satisfaction. I do want to say, though, I think it's important we note that this is not a rezoning. This has been zoned in R2, and Joe makes a good point. He bought the property as an R2 zone. My guess is Joanne did that, but I don't remember. That's so long ago that there's a lot of water under the bridge. I don't remember what happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was before I started in 2000, so would have been before you were on the planning commission as well.
Might have been. I don't remember it. I just don't remember the discussion. So it's, the rezoning isn't before us. What's before us is the preliminary plat. And on that, I suppose the detail of the plat is probably the appropriate thing to ask for first. Is there any questions about the detail?
Meets all the criteria.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about the proposal?
Only comment I've got is everything that I've seen Joe do, he does it right. He, as he said, he doesn't cut corners, he doesn't put up junk, and I would take him at his word.
He always cares about getting along with everybody, so he is going to do everything he can to make sure that his neighbors are happy as best possible.
Well, to dovetail with that, I mean, we have the detail of the plat. There's anything pure objectionable to any of you on that? I think the additional comments were good. I would recommend we do that with those additional comments.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote? Or I guess we need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for the residences at Eagle Creek with the stipulations of the drainage study and the tree preservation as noted. Good enough.
A second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Brandon, can you just clarify what you have for that second portion?
Yeah, hold on 1 second. I'm just getting the second. 1 second.
On the, which
I just
one?
want to clarify
Yeah,
how
yeah.
he has it worded for document.
So motion to approve the preliminary plat with, I have with 2 conditions, and then I have updated drainage study to confirm the need for the detention pond on 87th and Primrose Drive to be approved by the city engineer. And tracks A, B, and C have a tree preservation easement as a condition of approval.
Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And second, still good? Yep. Any further discussion? Call for vote?
Manson?
Yes.
Garrett?
Yes.
Templin?
Yes?
Lane?
Yes.
Schultz?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I believe that concludes our agenda for tonight. Is there any other business to be brought before the planning commission?
We might want to get Commissioner Milburn back in the
Oh,
room.
yeah. I forgot he was gone. I believe that concludes our agenda for tonight, unless there's any further business to be discussed at the planning commission. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We're adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.